This is Fertile, a podcast by ARTÀ Healing. Fertile is your journey back to the rhythm of your cycle, the wisdom of your hormones, and the sacred biology that shapes you. This is the space that we explore natural medicine, real root cause healing, dispel myths, and have authentic, raw, and honest conversations. I'm your host, Marigold, and while I've worked in wellness for over a decade, I've also navigated my own health challenges, including PCOS and chronic acne. This podcast serves the radical woman who knows deep within her bones there must be another way, for those ready to challenge the conventional and unlock their exceptional fertility. Hello, my beautiful women, and welcome back to another episode of Fertile. Today, I want to cover a topic that we discussed in a recent medicine circle with my group of clients, and they were trying to understand the cycle, the menstrual cycle, the ovarian cycle. It's got various different names. I prefer ovarian because it really puts the emphasis on the egg, right? Which really is the journey of the egg, our whole cycle. And the period, the bleed, menstruation is only a really small part of it for most of us. For others, it can take up quite a lot of the cycle if you've got endometriosis or adenomyosis, where you've got more heavy bleeding, for example. But what we were talking about was the different phases of the cycle. Now, this might be something that you're very new to, or maybe you've heard it a million times before, but I'm going to go through it because the way I see it is slightly different to other practitioners that I've spoken with. So as a herbalist who also is an Ayurvedic practitioner, I have found adding and understanding this element to my practice has been profound. Understanding that women are, very biologically, hormonally different to males. Recognizing that we're equal to each other. I love men very much, but we have to acknowledge that we are different, and that's okay. And in terms of hormones, the way that a man's male biology cycle, how they run, is usually with a 24-hour clock. And for women, we are more connected with what we call the Infradian Rhythm, which lasts for a month. It's usually connected to more of a moon cycle. Now, both men and women are affected by what we call the circadian rhythm, which is the sleep-wake cycle, day and night, both of us. I have heard before when, different practitioners saying that, male are more connected to the sun and women are more connected to the moon, which, I guess if we're looking at archetypes, that would be correct. But it's also making sure that we remember that women are very solar as well. We are very much connected to the sun too. But women have this extra element where we flow in a rhythm with the moon. And, also males do get affected by the moon. I see my son on a full moon and how he's just completely wild and how emotions run high in our household when there's men. It's not just that men are solar and women are lunar. It's not completely like that. But what I will say, this is very long-winded, but what I will say is that women have this infradian rhythm that men do not. There are some people that say that men go through like a 4-day cycle, but essentially what happens with a male biology, they release testosterone in the morning, okay, and it starts to taper off throughout the day, and it resets every day. So this is why our modern world is mostly designed around the 9 till 5, working 9 till 5, because we get all of our energy in the morning, it starts to taper off, and when we quiet down and, go to sleep in the evening when melatonin comes in. But women, we don't have this. We don't have this daily cycle. We have this monthly cycle. And what it does is it means that we're actually very different most weeks. And because of that, we need to adapt our lifestyle and our everything, our working environment, what we eat, everything changes for us. So we can't really work on a daily cycle, a 9 till 5. I mean, you can still have a 9 to 5 job if that's something that aligns with you, but it's still changing your workload, changing your social circle a little bit in those weeks, changing what you eat. So if this is all completely new to you, bear with me and I will go through this and we'll talk a little bit about archetypes, because I think when we use archetypes, our ancestors have always used archetypes to help us to understand concepts, right? Now, some practitioners use the seasons, which you can do. I don't use them that often because I work with clients internationally and sometimes they've only got a wet and a dry season, right? They don't have 4 seasons, so it's confusing to them. So I use 4 female archetypes and I think of them as goddesses. And for me, this works really well. Once you've learned this, you can really adapt it to whatever works for you, you know. But this is what I feel like mostly connects with my kind of Celtic ancestry as well. And I'm going to explain it to you. So, you've got these 4 phases. Now, when we're tracking our cycle, our menstrual and ovarian cycle, we tend to start day 1 as your bleed because it's a very clear biomarker. And when the blood is very visible in your underwear, you've had your period has arrived, you can go, oh, okay, cool, we can start the cycle again, it's day 1. But in terms of understanding and reconnecting to the cycle, the ovarian cycle, it would make sense that actually the cycle starts in spring, right? It's the same thing where, you know, celebrating a new year in January feels a little bit odd because actually the new year is in the spring equinox, in my opinion, around March, April time. So we start with spring, follicular, but it's quite hard to know exactly the moment that you move into your follicular phase, right? So we're going to go through these starting with follicular, but when you track, you can start in the menstrual phase. I hope that's not too confusing. So you've got these 4 phases: follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual. Okay? Those are the 4 phases. And they're very different for every woman. They're not a week long, which sometimes I see online. It's like week 1, follicular, week 2. And we're all different, okay? So also because of our Ayurvedic dosha, that also changes the length of our cycle and how we shift through these phases. So the way that we do it is learning about archetypes and then actually feeling into it, being more intuitive. When do you move through these phases? So follicular is called follicular because it's all about the follicle, right? The maturation of the follicle that houses the eggs, okay, in your ovary. And so we call it follicular because this is all about the growing, the birth, the beginning of the cycle, and it's connected to Kappa. So this, if you're tracking, this would technically be around, again, it's going to be different for every woman, but as a rough estimate, we can say day 7, okay? You might go into it on day 5 or day 10, but I'm just giving an example. So you go into the follicular phase, and this is where most of you are going to feel your best because estrogen, the hormone estrogen, starts to rise, which offers clarity, gives you that creative push. It helps to feel, you start to feel clearer minded. You've got more energy, your bleed is finished, right? And it feels like a new cycle has just started. This is when you're going to feel more sociable. You probably want to spend a little bit more money. You want to get out there. It's when I tend to book a lot more work, a lot more meetings. I feel my best in this phase. And then you move through that into ovulation. So ovulation is just a 24-hour event, right? It's just a day, but we tend to give it 3 to 4 days because of the kind of building up to ovulation. Estrogen's rising. You've also got the luteinizing hormone coming in, rising, which is going to trigger ovulation. And then it keeps rising, and then you ovulate. So this is a time where most women's libido is at its high sex drive, and if you're in a healthy body anyway, and you're going to feel pretty excited about life. You want to get a lot of things done. For some women, though, I do see that they say this is your most social time, but actually, I don't know about a lot of my clients I work with, they talk about actually all you want to do is, be with your partner or go out dancing. And especially if you've got a really healthy libido, then yeah, it's pretty hard to concentrate on anything else. This is really a time where it's at its highest, your libido is at its highest for obvious reasons, right? Because it's all about procreation. Your body is designed to continue the human race. That's just what it's doing, with or without you. And it's going to want to make you super horny at this time to make sure that you have sex when you're going to release an egg. So, of course, you can use, contraceptives if you're not looking to have a baby, but it all ties in very well. So the libido is going to keep increasing till it reaches a point where it feels like it's almost a need, not a want anymore. I think most women can attest to that and resonate with that. And then as soon as that's over, most women can feel a big shift in that. You can feel the shift post ovulation and you move, bam, you're in luteal. And I know this is the phase that most people do not like. I say most people, I mean most women do not like, because this is the time where PMS, PMDD can creep in. But it doesn't have to be that way. The luteal phase can be up to 2 weeks long. And we really don't want to spend half our life feeling miserable, right? And usually the reason that happens is because you don't have enough progesterone. The other hormone, the two dominant hormones we're talking about are estrogen and progesterone. So progesterone being the one that brings in all this rest and nourishment. It's a calming hormone, supports your nervous system. And if you have too much estrogen, then it's going to knock out progesterone. So that's something that I do with my clients, is we look at restoring that balance between these two dominant hormones in our cycle. So luteal comes, and it's called luteal because the corpus luteum is a Latin word. And it's basically the follicle that housed the eggs, right, in your ovary after you've ovulated, and it's burst through the ovary into the pelvic cavity. You then have this sort of bubble sac left, and they call it the yellow body. That's what corpus luteum means. And it just starts to produce progesterone. That's where the progesterone gets released from, the corpus luteum. I know this is all probably a little bit confusing if it's new to you, and it's quite hard to explain it without visuals. We have a whole workshop inside my program that has imagery, and it's a little bit easier. And there's also my Fertility Foundations masterclass, which goes through this a little bit more in depth if you're interested in learning more about it. But yeah, the luteal phase because of the corpus luteum. And once you're in this phase, we're going to then move into menstrual, right? And that's when your bleed comes, and we're back at day one. So some people like to connect this with the seasons, like I said at the beginning of the podcast episode. So we connect menstrual with winter, we connect follicular with spring, ovulatory with summer, and luteal with autumn. So if you live in a place that's got 4 seasons, that could be really helpful for you. You might think, oh, I'd like to connect that with that time. For me, and I feel like it can be a bit confusing, because then when you're in deep winter somewhere, but then you're talking about these inner seasons, I think in terms of nutrition it can get a bit confusing, because a lot of clients who I've started working with are changing their foods very much connected to the inner seasons and having a lot of salads around their ovulatory, but they're living in a place with loads of snow, and I personally feel like it can be a little bit too confusing. So I teach it slightly differently. I connect it to the female archetype. So we use follicular, which is all about birth and the young energy, and it's all to do with the maiden, right? She's youthful, she's playful. It's all to do with estrogen and youthful energy, I think is the way we describe it. And then we move into summer, which is all about the mother. So the mother is depicted as someone who is a leader, right? It's not necessarily about nurturing. It's nurturing in a different way, but it's all about, the leader. It's about boundaries and it's about creation. And she is assertive and actually more connected to Pitta in Ayurveda. So, this is the female archetype for her, the mother, ovulation. And then we move into the wild woman in the luteal phase. So the wild woman, she's sometimes also called the enchantress. I think really for me, she's this woman that's really misunderstood. I think, as we know, most people really don't like this phase, and we do feel a bit wild. I went to a festival once and there was a workshop, and she said, Jules Wingfield, her name was, she said that this was called the no bullshit zone, and I loved it. And it really stuck with me because it felt so true to most women, including myself, knowing that when you're in this phase, it's very raw, very authentic. You can't really bullshit. You get annoyed about things that maybe you have more resilience in other times of your cycle, that maybe things wouldn't bother you, but they do. You start noticing a lot more at this time. And that's because it's a very intuitive time. It's a spiritual time. And when you don't have the chronic PMS and PMDD, it can be a very beautiful time to move through, especially if you understand what the Infradian rhythm actually is, how to tune into it, and what you need to do in order to maintain harmony within it. So next I'm going to go through a little bit about more tangible practices you can bring in and how to actually live in alignment with this incredible rhythm that we have built into us that's just not really recognized or talked about in the modern day. So we're on wild woman, and then actually when your period arrives, this is the wise woman. Wise woman is all connected to the elder. I imagine this beautiful woman with long grey hair, and she's just very wise. She's got a lot of experience, and you're moving into Vata time here. This is all connected to the ether, spirit world, and it's actually a really profound time for downloads and epiphany moments. I get a lot of epiphany moments during my period. It's a big release, right? We all can recognize that and go, the bleed has arrived. There's that build up, progesterone has fallen, and our bleed arrives. Okay, so I didn't really talk about cervical mucus and fluid because I think that's another area that we can discuss, but again, it is in my masterclass. But I think what's going to be more helpful for all of you, which I get asked a lot, is talking about what can you actually do during your cycle to actually create hormone balance and help with fertility, So it's these simple shifts in understanding and tuning into this cycle can be profound. Honestly, just living with this cycle, it can change a lot in terms of your hormones. So, and how you're living, and it's not just, it affects everything in your life, from relationships to your weight and your desire, appetite, and metabolism, everything. It's your cycle is everything. It's not just reproductive, it's your entire health. So let's go through them. Now, I have seen with other practitioners, this isn't to say that they're wrong, because it's not blah, blah, blah. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I teach it slightly different because I want to make it as simple as possible. And a lot of the time it feels a little bit complex when I hear, you need to eat more root vegetables in your luteal, and you need to have more salads in the sort of spring phase. And if that works for you, then great. But I think sometimes having like a box of specific foods that you can only eat in certain times of the month just feels a little bit linear, and we're cyclical beings, right? So for me, it's as simple as this. I call it low and slow, high and fly. Easy to remember, right? So when you're in your luteal phase and menstrual, so just before your period and during your period, you're going to be in high and fly. I'm going to explain what this means in a minute. And then when you move into follicular spring phase and ovulatory summer phase, so when you're building up to ovulation, you finished your period and you're moving into this kind of honey time, I call it, the best time of the cycle, you're going to be in low and slow. So what it means is high and fly means high cortisol, and fly meaning fast metabolism. So high cortisol, fast metabolism. So this means you've got high cortisol meaning high stress. Your stress resilience goes down and you don't have much resilience at this time. Sorry, it's true. And then you've got a much faster metabolism. So this means what you need is to eat more, tune in to your hunger levels. Don't try and diet or fast at this time. You need a lot more dense nutrition. So I would recommend, a lot more protein. This is why you get cravings around your period and just before your period in the luteal premenstrual time, usually because you're not eating enough. And you eat always, the body's always going to go for carbohydrates and sugar because it's quick energy. We're designed to get quick, fast energy. But actually, if we can move towards the kind of ketone side of things and actually have more protein, I'm talking meat, fish, butter, if dairy works for you, but, have some raw dairy is always amazing to have. You could have hummus, you could make a dal. You want to make sure you're having complete proteins, eggs. Yeah, I would really focus on having enough food so you feel satisfied. A lot of the time we just keep eating and eating and eating because our body's looking for nutrients and it's just not satiated enough. So really dense nutrition. Then in terms of having high cortisol levels, you really want to move away from anything that can cause stress. Now, of course, you can't be completely stress-free. That wouldn't be possible ever. But what you can do is start to think about in what ways can you support yourself at this time during luteal and menstrual when you've naturally got higher cortisol levels in your body and you just are not going to be able to be as resilient as other times in your cycle, like when you're ovulating, for example. So maybe you don't go and see the mother-in-law that triggers you, Maybe you move some of your work deadlines to the week before or a week after if you can push things. If someone books a specific, meeting that is going to take a lot of your energy and it falls right on your period, can you push it? Maybe it's not the best time to go and do a marathon during your luteal phase. Or anything that is quite personal to you in terms of it's going to cause you stress. Going to a mall where it's like you already get a bit stressed out in crowded places. Don't do it, because your resilience is lower. Okay, fine, do it all in your ovulatory, go to the festival, go and have a big social time and book in your stress. Because actually, when you move into follicular and ovulatory, women are extremely powerful this time and your resilience is incredible. You can handle so much at this time. Your cortisol levels are really low. So, high and fly for your luteal and menstrual and low and slow. So when you're in your follicular and ovulatory, it's low and slow. So you've got low cortisol and slow metabolism. So it's the complete opposite. And what that means is, your resilience to stress is much lower. You can get a lot more done. Maybe you can work like a 12-hour shift. Who knows, But maybe you just don't work at all or as much or as many hours in a row when you're in your luteal phase. And it means that your metabolism is much slower too. So that means you can actually do a bit of fasting, eat less, eat lighter I would still always tell clients to eat dense nutrition, because especially if we're working on fertility, we want as much dense nutrition as possible, eating highly nutritious, mineral-rich foods. But maybe it's that you could do a fast. You could eat a little bit lighter, maybe having some more bone broth, soups. Maybe you don't need that extra sourdough bread or whatever with your breakfast. You can have like maybe some more protein and scrambled eggs or something. It's just slightly lighter, I would say. And I think most women can attest to this. You feel like you don't have as many cravings at this time. You can work out a lot more at this time too. Go for do some strength training, go to your Pilates if you want to go running or cycling or swimming, dancing. This is a time where all your cortisol is low and your metabolism is slow. So you're actually going to build more muscle at this time, and it's much more beneficial for your body. Whereas actually if you start dieting, eating less and working out more in your luteal phase or on your period, it causes a lot of stress in the body, and what it can do is actually trigger fat storage, because fat is your security, right? It stores away fat for later in case of starvation and things like that. And especially if you're in your luteal phase and you start dieting or doing a fast, or you, I don't know, go on a really long run, and it might feel good in the moment, but afterwards you feel completely exhausted. You might start to trigger a bit of fat storage. And of course it's okay to have a little bit, but if you're doing this all the time unconsciously without knowing what's going on in your system, you might be triggering a lot of hormonal issues, fat storage, high stress, cortisol being released, blood sugar issues, and then causing a lot of fertility issues as well. So learning this can be extremely powerful in connecting with yourself, understanding why you feel the way you do at some parts of your cycle or the month, and why you need more food, and you suddenly have all these cravings and you just can't handle that neighbor. There's a reason for it. And this work is not just for females, it's for males too. It's imperative that men can start to understand their wives, right? Their sisters, their mothers, aunts, nieces in a different way. And there's still so much in society where I feel like women are really just very much misunderstood, and she's on her period, and she's a bit PMSy, and it's so suppressive and diminishing. And how wonderful would it be to integrate this into the modern world and have like your partner knows, okay, you've ovulated. Okay, so she's gone through this crazy high libido. He's completely supported you and honored you through that. And then it's suddenly switched off a bit, and you're like, okay, now I need steak, and I really need support and cuddles and baths and night-ins and Netflix, And then your period comes, and whoa, we've got to give her space now. She needs space. Leave her alone. It's nothing to do with you. Buy her some flowers, buy her some chocolates, and give her space to do her own thing. Make her room the space that's sacred to her, and just leave her the hell alone. And then as soon as her period's finished, date night, take her out. Maybe you can actually arrange something for her to go with her friends to a gig, to a festival, just to go and have a picnic with her girlfriends, or her mother, or just something with her, with her friends. It's a really nice thing to do that time. Or a date night. And then organize some more date nights around ovulatory. Maybe she wants to go dancing, maybe she just wants to stay in. Maybe she wants a weekend at home with you and no one else. Maybe don't invite your mother over when she's ovulating, because that's not going to go down well, is it? Maybe don't go on the golf trip when she's ovulating. Maybe try and go on a golf trip when she's on her period. It's so important for your relationships to understand women and how they work. It can really improve and bring a couple so much closer. You know, women feel aroused, connected, in love when their partner especially understands them, right? I think from my own experience, and also most women I speak to, like, it's for men when they do things for their partner, or you don't have to be, just have to be partner, it can be whatever, but when a woman feels listened to, when a woman feels supported, when she feels like she's been given space, that's the time when she's going to feel most connected to you, right? And that's how women connect. It's different. Men connect in a very different way. That's a whole other podcast episode. But understanding your woman, understanding your sister, your mother, whoever it is, that relationship, understanding that they are different biologically, and it's really what separates us, and it's what makes us beautifully different. And probably for another episode, but it's really important to actually know what's healthy and normal for a woman when she goes through these 4 shifts in the month. But actually, for most women in this modern day, we're having extended luteal phases, 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes women are having 2 to 3 week bleeds, sometimes 4-week bleed. They're not even getting the follicular and ovulatory time, you know. And as you know, as a man, if you have got a partner going through this, then maybe recognizing that that's not okay and that's not normal and she needs help, and instead of diminishing her experience and, oh, she's bleeding again and da 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 and she's always on her period, like, what can you do to support her through that? And can you do some research into finding support for her? You know, it's really just twisting the shift or the mindset on this. So yeah, I could waffle on about this forever. I really hope this was a really interesting introduction into the female cycle, the Infradian rhythm, the 4 phases that we go through. And if you want to go deeper, there is a masterclass. It's completely free. It's called the Fertility Foundations. It goes through the whole cycle in detail. I tell it as a story because, again, I love archetypes and I think it helps you to really understand what it means in a storytelling way. We go through symptoms as messages as well, and talking about the root of conditions like endometriosis and PCOS, heavy periods, what it means in terms of how, like, what your hormones are doing. We learn a lot through symptoms, and the body speaks to us in a language that many of us haven't learned yet, but we can learn it. And we also talk about fertility myths and things that you can implement to start, awakening your fertility and healing at the root, because heavy menstrual bleeding, prolonged bleeding, heavy hemorrhaging, debilitating periods with a lot of pain is not normal. Equally, not having a cycle and random irregular cycles where your period shows up every 3 months is also not normal. So, and I tell you this because you can have a beautiful, blissful cycle and it's possible. So why not work towards that if you desire? Okay, my loves, I will leave it there and I'll see you in the next episode. All right, lots of love. Bye.